Help me. I'm having a heart attack, were the words that broke the silence of the highway that dawn, and you will never look at the face of a stranger the same after hearing this story. Stay until the end, because what happened next was so unexpected that even today I shudder when I remember it. And before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because here you'll find stories that will not only give you goosebumps, but will also make you reflect on how fragile and powerful life can be. It was 3 a.m. on a freezing November night. The headlights of an old delivery truck lit up a deserted stretch of the state highway that snaked between arid hills. At the wheel was Julián Ortega, a middle-aged delivery man with a tired but determined look. His truck was loaded with dozens of packages bound for different inland towns, from small appliances to urgent medicines that several families were expecting at dawn. He had already been on the road for more than 12 hours, with only a couple of quick stops to stretch his legs and refuel. The steering wheel was hot from the pressure of his hands, and his eyes, accustomed to the darkness, seemed like 2 more headlights in the middle of the night. He had reasons not to stop. The company pressured him to meet delivery deadlines, and besides, at home a much bigger concern awaited him. His younger sister, Clara, had been battling kidney disease for months. Julián worked tirelessly because they needed money for treatment and, above all, to cover the cost of a possible transplant. Christmas was approaching, but in his house there were no lights or decorations, only the fragile hope that Julián's effort could twist destiny's hand. That thought kept him awake as he hummed softly along with a song on the radio. However, fatigue was beginning to weigh on him. The cold air coming through the open window barely managed to clear his head. With every curve, the road seemed longer and more silent, as if it were stretching on purpose to test him. It was at that moment when he saw it. In the distance, a flickering light broke the darkness. It was a car stopped on the shoulder, with its hazard lights flashing. Next to it, a human figure waved its arms desperately. Julián instinctively slowed down, but the memory of so many stories of highway assaults chilled his blood. It was not uncommon for criminals to use decoys, an old man, a woman, even a child, anything to make a trucker stop. And he knew well that if he were robbed, he would not only lose his cargo, he would also lose his job, and with that, his sister's treatment. He clenched his teeth. "Don't stop, keep going," he told himself, hands firm on the wheel. But then something happened that forced him to make the hardest decision of his life. The silhouette of the old man, illuminated by his truck's headlights, suddenly bent forward. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his chest with both hands. His scream pierced the dawn with a pain so real that Julián's skin bristled. "Help me! I'm having a heart attack!" roared the raspy voice, full of desperation and truth. Julián's heart skipped a beat. He braked hard a few meters ahead, the truck trembling under his feet. He looked in the rearview mirror. There he was, an old man hunched on the asphalt, gasping like a fish out of water. Doubt struck him with the same force as adrenaline. What if it was a trap? What if they were waiting in the bushes to strip him of everything? What would happen if he didn't help, and that man died right there, knowing he could have done something? The face of Clara, his sick sister, flashed in his mind. What would she have wanted him to do? She always repeated, "The good you do in life comes back to you somehow, Julián, even if it's late." He pressed his lips together, took a deep breath, and murmured, "Virgin Mary, protect me." He grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and a small knife he always kept hidden for precaution. He got out of the truck with his heart pounding in his chest. The silence of the night was unsettling. Only the running engine of the truck, the crunch of gravel under his boots, and the labored breathing of the old man kneeling on the pavement could be heard. "Easy, I'm here now," Julián said, approaching cautiously. The flashlight beam lit up a pale, sweaty face, eyes squinting in pain. The old man, with completely white hair, wore a plaid shirt and worn-out trousers. He looked fragile, too human to be a decoy. My chest hurts," the man gasped. "Feels like a rock is crushing me." Julián swallowed hard. He knew those symptoms. His own grandfather had died of a heart attack years ago, and the scene was all too familiar. "Are you alone? Is there anyone else with you?" he asked, still wary. "Just me. My wife died long ago," he answered with a broken voice. "My medicine. It's in the car's glove box. Please." The doubt came back like a blow. If he approached the car, what if someone suddenly jumped out to ambush him? Even so, the old man's gaze left no room for lies. It was pure pain. Julián took a deep breath and forced himself to walk toward the vehicle, an old dusty white sedan. The passenger door was ajar. He shone the flashlight inside and found a pill bottle in the glove box. The name on the label read isosorbide nitrate, for angina crisis use. It wasn't a trap. He ran back to the old man, who could barely stay seated. "Is this it?" Julián asked, showing the bottle. The man nodded with effort. Julián placed a pill in his mouth and offered water from his canteen. The old man closed his eyes and, after a few seconds, his breathing began to ease just a little. "Thank you. I thought no one would stop," he whispered weakly. 3 cars went right past me. Julián felt a knot in his throat. He himself had almost been the 4th. "Don't worry, you're not alone anymore. I'm going to take you to a hospital," he said firmly. The old man looked at him with a glimmer of relief. "My name is Eliseo. Eliseo Mendez," he murmured. "God bless you, son." Julián helped him to his feet, noticing the man was limping on his left leg. He held him carefully and guided him to the truck. Getting him into the passenger seat was a difficult task, but at last he managed it. Eliseo collapsed with a sigh, exhausted but calmer. Julián started the truck, glanced at the old man, and asked, "And what are you doing traveling alone, Don Eliseo, at this hour?" The old man stayed silent for a few seconds, as if the answer hurt more than his chest. "I'm going to look for my son. We haven't spoken in 15 years. I was told he's sick. I don't want him to leave this world before we reconcile." Julián stayed quiet, eyes fixed on the road. He felt those words cut through him in a strange way, as if they carried a message he had yet to decipher. And what neither of them knew was that this encounter would not only save a life that night, but would also set off a chain of revelations and dangers that would forever change Julián's path. The truck moved slowly along the dark road. The headlights lit up a narrow stretch of asphalt that seemed endless. Julián kept both hands firm on the wheel, but his gaze shifted between the road and the old man beside him. Don Eliseo breathed with difficulty, though no longer as heavily as before. Still, each gasp was a reminder of the fragile thread he was clinging to. The silence in the cab grew heavy. Julián searched for words to keep him awake. He remembered what he had learned in a first aid course. In cases of possible heart attack, keeping the patient conscious was vital. "And how long has it been since you last saw your son?" he asked, without taking his eyes off the road. The old man sighed, and that sigh seemed to carry 15 years of regret. "Since his mother died. We didn't know how to handle the pain. I locked myself in my guilt, he in his resentment. I said things I should never have said. So did he. And we never saw each other again." Julián gripped the wheel tighter. He understood all too well what family resentments meant. The absence of his own father had marked his entire childhood like an open wound. "And now?" he asked cautiously. "I was told he's sick, very sick. He may not have much time left. I can't let him go without asking for forgiveness." Don Eliseo's words echoed in the cab like a painful reverberation. Julián glanced sideways at the old man. His wrinkled profile, lit by the faint glow of the dashboard, looked like the living portrait of fragility. Suddenly, a burst of lights in the rear-view mirror interrupted his thoughts. A dark pickup truck was speeding up behind them. "Who the hell drives like that at this hour?" muttered Julián. The vehicle suddenly slowed as it reached the back of the truck and stuck close, as if following them. Julián frowned. He pressed the accelerator a bit, but the pickup mimicked his movement. His skin bristled. Don Eliseo noticed the tension on his face. "Is something wrong?" "A car is following us too closely," Julián replied, trying to sound calm. For a few seconds, the silence grew even heavier. Then, the pickup switched on its high beams, blinding the truck's mirrors. "Damn it!" growled Julián, shielding his eyes for a moment. The pickup honked insistently, as if trying to make them stop. Julián's heart began to pound. This wasn't normal. Something in his gut screamed danger. "Buckle your seatbelt, Don Eliseo," he said in a low voice. "Why? What's happening?" "I don't know, but I don't like this at all." The truck's engine roared as Julián accelerated. The road was narrow, with few options for escape. The pickup behind did the same, following them like a predator. Suddenly, the lights disappeared. Julián checked the mirror, bewildered. What the hell? The pickup had gone completely dark, invisible in the night. Only the distant sound of an engine could be heard, circling back and forth, like a wolf surrounding its prey. Eliseo looked at him with fear in his eyes. "Son, do you think they're after you?" Julián shook his head, though he really had no idea. "I'm not carrying anything of value. Just boxes of medicine, clothes, things like that," he said. "If it's a robbery, they picked the wrong poor guy." But what he couldn't imagine was that the pickup wasn't after the cargo. It was after Eliseo. Miles ahead, as the truck struggled along a winding stretch of road, the pickup reappeared out of nowhere, pulling up alongside. It was trying to force them off the road. Julián clenched his teeth and gripped the wheel tight. "I'm not stopping," he shouted, more to himself than to the old man. Suddenly, the pickup swerved ahead and cut them off violently. Julián slammed on the brakes, the screeching sounding like a metallic scream in the night. The truck stopped just meters from crashing into the pickup. Julián's heart pounded hard in his chest. Two hooded men got out of the pickup. One carried a flashlight and something metallic that gleamed in his hand. The other held what looked like a bat. "Don't open the door," Julián warned Eliseo, instinctively locking the doors. One of the men struck the side of the truck with a bat, the metal booming like thunder. "Get the old man out," he shouted harshly. A chill ran down Julián's back. The old man? Eliseo? How did they know he was there? The old man turned even paler, pressing his hand against his chest. "No, it can't be," he whispered. "They found me." Julián stared at him, confused. "What do you mean, they found me? Who are those guys?" Eliseo couldn't answer. The men struck the truck again, harder. "Get the old man out now, or we'll drag you both out." Julián swallowed hard. His instinct told him that opening the door would be a death sentence. He gripped the wheel as if it were a lifeline. "Hold on tight, Don Eliseo," he murmured. The old man looked at him, bewildered. And then Julián floored the accelerator. The truck roared like a beast and rammed into the pickup, sending it flying into the ditch. The men tumbled on the ground, screaming. Julián didn't look back. He kept the pedal down, the engine shaking as the road stretched like an endless ribbon beneath the wheels. Eliseo clung to the dashboard, eyes wide with terror. "You're insane, boy. They'll kill us." They were already trying to. Julián shot back, adrenaline flooding his body. "If I don't leave them behind, they'll force us out of the truck." Silence returned suddenly, broken only by the roar of the engine. For several miles, no one spoke. Finally, Julián eased off the gas, his hands still trembling. He looked at the old man, who seemed more frightened than sick. "Tell me the truth, Don Eliseo," he said gravely. "Who the hell is after you?" The old man closed his eyes, as if he had been running from that question for years. "I can't say it. If I talk, I'll put you in danger too." "I'm already in danger," Julián shot back. "Those men almost killed us. I want to know why." Eliseo looked at him with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "I'm no saint, son. I made very grave mistakes in my youth. Things that can't be erased. And even though I left it all behind, there are those who never forget." Julián clenched his jaw. Fate had placed a sick old man in his path, and now it turned out he carried enemies. But what Julián still didn't know was that this old man was hiding a secret that could change not only his life, but that of his sick sister. The silence in the cab became unbearable. The truck's engine roared beneath his feet, but the only thing Julián heard was the echo of Don Eliseo's last phrase, "I'm no saint." His pulse raced, his knuckles white from gripping the wheel so tightly. It wasn't fair. He had only wanted to help an old sick man, and now he found himself fleeing from armed hooded men in the middle of the night. He took a deep breath and spoke in a grave voice. "Look, Don Eliseo, I'm already in this up to my neck. So if you want me to take you wherever you're going, I need you to tell me the truth. Who's after you, and why?" The old man watched him in silence, his gaze tired but deep, as if deciding whether or not to trust him. Finally, he sighed. "More than 40 years ago, I worked for dangerous people." Julián frowned. "What kind of people?" "Smugglers. Thieves. A group that trafficked goods along these same highways. I was young, ambitious, and foolish. I thought easy money would solve my family's life." He paused, his voice breaking. "But I ended up losing everything." Eliseo clenched his fist on his knee. "One day things went wrong. There was a robbery where an innocent man died. And even though I wasn't the one who pulled the trigger, I was with them. I didn't have the courage to report them or to walk away. Since then, I've carried that weight." Julián was speechless. He stared at the road, as if searching for answers in the endless white line stretching ahead. "And those men from earlier?" he asked. "They're the sons of the man who died. They spent their entire lives looking for me. They swore revenge. And it seems they finally found me." The confession dropped like a slab of stone in the cab. Julián ran a hand over his face, incredulous. "So that means by stopping to help you, I just became their target too." Eliseo lowered his gaze, ashamed. "I'm sorry, son. I didn't ask for you to cross my path. But I did." Julián shot back, slamming the wheel. "And now my sister, my family, everything I do for them, is at risk." An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Outside, the road kept winding under the starry night, indifferent to the storm roaring inside the truck. Finally, Eliseo spoke in a faint voice. "Maybe not everything is lost." "What do you mean?" The old man looked him straight in the eyes. "In those years, besides mistakes, I also kept things. Money. I didn't touch it for decades because I wanted to leave it all behind. But now, if I managed to see my son and set things right, I could leave you a part of it." Julián narrowed his eyes, suspicious. "What kind of amount are we talking about?" Eliseo stayed silent for a few seconds, as if it weighed on him to say it. "Enough to pay for the transplant your sister needs." The truck filled with a new kind of silence. It wasn't fear. It was hope disguised as suspicion. Julián felt a knot in his throat. "How do you know about my sister?" he asked tensely. Eliseo gave him a tired half-smile. "Because you didn't stop mentioning her while you drove. You spoke in a low voice, almost like praying, and I listened." Julián lowered his gaze. Yes, it was true. While driving, he constantly thought about Clara. "Then," he said faintly, "are you telling me that I risked my life helping you, and now I might save my sister thanks to you?" Eliseo nodded. Destiny has strange ways of crossing paths. Julián didn't reply. Part of him wanted to believe it. Part of him thought it could all be just another lie from an old man with secrets. The road kept swallowing kilometers until, in the distance, the lights of a small town appeared. The rusty sign read, "San Geronimo, 15 kilometers. "There's a rural hospital there," Julián said. "We'll take you there first." Eliseo nodded silently. But just as they entered the final stretch toward the town, Julián noticed something strange. A vehicle was parked at the side of the road, its lights off. As they passed by, he could see the silhouette of someone sitting behind the wheel, motionless. Eliseo noticed it too and tensed up. "Don't stop," he whispered with a trembling voice. "Don't stop for anything in the world." Julián sped up. But in the rear-view mirror he saw that vehicle turn on its lights and start after them. Another pursuer. Julián's heart began to race again. "How many people are after you, Don Eliseo? How many enemies do you have?" Eliseo closed his eyes, clutching his chest. "More than I'd like." The new vehicle was approaching quickly. And as the lights drew closer and closer, Julián realized that the road that night had not only tested his faith in helping a stranger, it was dragging him into a fate much greater and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. And the most devastating truth was yet to be revealed, that the son Eliseo was searching for was not a complete stranger to Julián. The truck's engine roared as Julián kept his eyes fixed on the road. The new vehicle followed behind them like an insistent shadow, unhurried but relentless, like a hunter who knows that sooner or later the prey will fall. Julián breathed deeply, trying to control the trembling of his hands on the wheel. Beside him, Eliseo was pale, his hand pressed to his chest, but his eyes remained open, fixed on the rearview mirror as if expecting the face of a familiar ghost. "They're not going to give up, are they?" murmured Julián. Eliseo shook his head with a gesture of resignation. "No. These men don't know the meaning of surrender. They've been chasing vengeance for too long." Julián clenched his teeth. He couldn't let them catch him, but he couldn't drive forever either. The fuel wasn't endless, and the town was already near. Suddenly, a memory struck him like thunder. His mother's voice, Clara, speaking to him when he was just a boy. "Your father didn't die. He simply chose not to be with us. One day you'll have to make peace with that absence, Julián." He had always hated that phrase. He had always felt that something about the story was incomplete. And now, glancing at the old man beside him, he felt the pieces of a hidden puzzle beginning to fit together. "Don Eliseo," he said firmly, breaking the silence. "What did you say your son's name was?" The old man looked at him with glassy eyes, as if he feared the question. "Why? Answer me. What's his name?" Eliseo took a deep breath, as if the words weighed tons. "His name is Reuben Mendez." Julián's heart stopped for a second. Reuben. That was the name his mother had always avoided mentioning. The name that appeared on an old envelope hidden in the kitchen drawer, next to a black-and-white photo of a young man he had never met. "No," he whispered, incredulous. "It can't be." Eliseo frowned. "What is it, son? Why that look?" Julián gripped the wheel until his knuckles turned white. "Because Reuben Mendez is my father." Eliseo froze. His lips trembled as he tried to speak, but no sound came out. Finally, he whispered, "No, it can't be." "Yes, it can." Julián looked straight at him, with restrained rage. "That man abandoned us when I was a child. He left and never came back. My mother raised me alone, working day and night. And now it turns out that you are his father." The silence in the cab grew so thick it felt like it filled their lungs. Eliseo closed his eyes, as if the revelation hurt him more than his own sick heart. "My God!" he murmured. "Then you are my grandson." The words pierced him like a dagger. Julián felt a mix of rage, disbelief, and confusion. "Don't you dare call me that!" he shouted, slamming the wheel. "You don't know what it was like to grow up without a father. You don't know what it was like to watch my mother break her hands to feed us, while he, your son, lived who knows how." Eliseo bowed his head, defeated. "You're right. I don't deserve to call you grandson, nor do I deserve to ask for forgiveness. But believe me, Julián, if I'm here, if I'm looking for him, it's because I want to fix what I broke." Julián glared at him with anger. "And you think money can fix that? With those stories of a hidden treasure?" Eliseo lifted his gaze, steady. "It's not just money. It's justice. That money comes from the sins I committed, and I want it at least to serve to save someone innocent. Your sister." The truck jolted as it took a sharp curve, interrupting the tension. Behind them, the pursuing vehicle held steady, as if waiting for the exact moment to strike. Julián pressed harder on the accelerator. "All I want is to get my sister out of this alive. If that means carrying your secrets, I'll do it, but don't ask me to forgive you." Eliseo nodded silently, tears running down his wrinkled cheeks. Suddenly, the vehicle behind switched on its high beams and sped up. Julián saw it dangerously close in the rearview mirror. "They're going to ram us," he shouted. The impact came like thunder. The truck shook violently, and Julián had to wrench the wheel with all his strength to keep it from overturning. Eliseo cried out in pain as he slammed against the dashboard. "Hold on, Don Eliseo!" Julián exclaimed, sweating cold. The vehicle rammed them again, harder. The truck skidded toward the ditch. With superhuman effort, Julián managed to keep it on the road. "We won't hold out much longer," he gasped. Eliseo, his face contorted, searched for something in his jacket pocket. He pulled out a yellowed envelope, wrinkled with age. "If we don't make it," he said in a broken voice. "This envelope has the address where the money is hidden. It's all I can give you, for your sister." Julián glanced at him, incredulous. "What now? This isn't the time for games." "It's not a game," Eliseo shouted, with the little strength he had left. "It's the only thing that can save her." Another blow shook the truck. The envelope fell to the cab floor. Julián barely caught sight of it as he leaned to keep control of the wheel. The pursuing vehicle prepared to ram them a third time. And Julián understood that night, between the life of an old man with secrets and the fate of his sister, he would have to make a decision that would mark him forever. The roar of the engine pounded in Julián's chest like a war drum. The truck shuddered with each blow it took from behind. The pursuing vehicle did not let up, seeming determined to drive them off the road at any cost. Eliseo panted, his face beaded with sweat, clutching his chest with one hand and the wrinkled envelope with the other. The paper was already stained with blood. The old man's pressure had opened a wound in his side, perhaps from the blow against the dashboard. "Don't lose it, Julián," he said hoarsely. "That envelope is more valuable than you imagine." The truck shook again. Julián felt the rear wheels skid onto the gravel of the shoulder. A couple more inches and they would roll over. "They're going to kill us both," he shouted. He had no weapons, no backup, only a truck full of packages that now felt like a rolling coffin. And yet, something inside him ignited, a spark of fury, of instinct. He gripped the wheel and muttered, "If they want war, they'll have it." With a sharp turn, he switched off the truck's headlights. The world became a black shroud, barely lit by the moon. The pursuing vehicle, blinded by the sudden darkness, hesitated for a second. That second was enough. Julián slammed on the brakes and then swerved hard to the left. The pursuer, racing full speed, couldn't react in time. It shot past, scraping the side of the truck, and ended up losing control. The screech of tires mixed with a crash as the vehicle flew into the ditch and slammed against a tree. The silence that followed was so deep that Julián's ears rang. He switched the truck's lights back on, breathing heavily. His heart pounded like a runaway hammer. Eliseo looked at him with a mix of surprise and pride. "You have your father's courage," he said weakly. Julián clenched his jaw. "Don't compare me to him. He abandoned us. I'm here, fighting for my sister." Eliseo tried to reply, but a coughing fit cut him off. The envelope slipped from his hand and fell to the floor again. Julián caught it quickly and shoved it into the glove compartment. "I'll see what this is about later," he said harshly. "First we're going to save you, if it's still possible." The truck carried on, shaky but steady, until the first lights of San Geronimo appeared on the horizon. Julián breathed in relief. They had survived the night. Or so he thought. The rural hospital of San Geronimo was a small building, with peeling walls and flickering fluorescent lights at the entrance. Julián braked hard and jumped out to help Eliseo. The old man was exhausted. He could barely stand. Julián practically carried him into the emergency room, where a drowsy nurse received them. "I need help. It's a heart attack," Julián shouted. Immediately, the staff rushed in with a stretcher. Eliseo was laid down and taken inside, surrounded by white coats. Julián tried to follow, but the nurse blocked his way. "Please wait here." Julián dropped into a plastic chair. Exhaustion, fear, and anger swirled inside him like a storm. He pulled the envelope from the glove compartment and held it in his hands. The paper was damp, stained with dried blood. He opened it carefully. Inside was a hand-drawn map, with coordinates and a name written in faded ink, La Quebrada. Alongside it, a rusty key and a crumpled paper with a phrase, "For Reuben, when the past catches up with me." A shiver ran down Julian's back. That envelope wasn't meant for him, but for his father. And yet, now it was in his hands. Hours later, a doctor came out of the emergency room. His face was serious, but not entirely grim. "Mr. Eliseo is stable for now. The medication and rest have bought him some time, but his heart is very weak. He needs more specialized treatment in the capital." Julian nodded, a knot in his throat. "Can I see him?" The doctor hesitated, then nodded. When Julian entered the room, he saw Eliseo lying in bed, pale but conscious. He smiled weakly upon seeing him. "You survived," he said faintly. "I knew you had it in you." Julian placed the envelope on the table. "What is this? What does La Quebrada mean?" Eliseo looked at the map with nostalgia. "It's the place where I hid everything. The money, the evidence, the sins of my life. I buried it there decades ago, when I decided to leave that world behind. And why now? Why give it to me?" Eliseo closed his eyes. "Because you are my blood. Because even if you hate your father, I know you have something he lost. Courage. That money. It can't erase the past, but it can give your sister a future." Julian stared at him with rage and confusion. Part of him wanted to believe. Part of him thought it was just another trick. But deep down he knew one thing. That envelope could be the only real chance to save Clara. Eliseo coughed again, his gaze lost on the ceiling. "Just promise me one thing, son," he murmured. "Promise me you'll see your father. That you'll tell him that I forgive him." Julian remained silent. He couldn't promise something he didn't feel. But neither could he deny it to a dying man. He nodded quietly. Eliseo smiled faintly, and then closed his eyes. Julian left the room with a map in his hand and his heart ablaze. Now he had a new destination, La Quebrada. What he didn't know was that he wouldn't be the only one searching for it. The men who had sworn vengeance on Eliseo also had word of the envelope, and they were willing to do anything to take it from him. The dawn in San Geronimo broke with a red sunrise, streaked with low clouds that seemed to herald a storm. Julian's truck rested parked in front of the rural hospital, covered in dust and dents on its bodywork, as if it had survived a battle. Inside the hospital, Julian hadn't been able to sleep. He had the map spread across his knees, tracing the coordinates over and over. La Quebrada was a spot several kilometers away, a forgotten canyon where only the oldest locals dared to go. They said it was cursed, that it had been a bandit's hideout and the scene of violent deaths. But for Julian, that place wasn't a legend. It was the only hope of getting the money for his sister's transplant. He stood up abruptly, determined. He put the map and the key in the inside pocket of his jacket. Before leaving, he approached Eliseo's room. The old man was sleeping deeply, connected to an, his face pale but serene. "I don't know if I forgive you," Julian whispered, his voice breaking. "But I'm going to finish what you started." The road to La Quebrada wasn't easy. Julian drove his truck along paths that grew narrower and narrower, until the asphalt disappeared and only a dirt road remained, surrounded by dry bushes and sharp rocks. The tires groaned under the weight of the load, but Julian didn't slow down. At every kilometer, he checked the rear-view mirror, fearing to see another enemy truck appear. The memory of the hooded men still haunted him. He knew they hadn't given up. Finally, he reached a point where the road no longer allowed the truck to go forward. He killed the engine and got out, with the map in one hand and the flashlight in the other. The silence was so deep he could hear his own breathing. He continued on foot, entering the canyon. The rocky walls rose on either side like stone giants, and the air grew colder, charged with echoes. Julian followed the markings on the map, counting steps, watching for landmarks. A dry tree, a rock shaped like a cross. After nearly an hour of walking, he arrived at a point marked on the paper, a narrow crack between two massive rocks. He crouched and squeezed through with difficulty, until he reached a small hidden clearing. There, in the center, was a mound of carefully stacked stones. Julian's heart pounded hard. He knelt down and began removing the stones one by one. Sweat ran down his forehead, His breathing grew ragged, but anxiety kept him moving. Finally, his hand struck something metallic, a rusty iron box, closed with an old padlock. He pulled out the key from the envelope, trembling. He slid it into the lock and turned it. The metallic click sounded like thunder in the silence. He opened the box slowly. Inside were bundles of bills wrapped in cloth bags, yellow documents, and an old pistol wrapped in a rag. Julián couldn't believe it. It was true. Eliseo had told the truth. He picked up a bundle of bills and held it with trembling hands. It was enough money to change his sister's life. But at that moment, a crack made him spin around. At the entrance of the clearing, 3 silhouettes stood against the rising sun. Armed men, hooded, their eyes fixed on the open box. "You don't need to carry that anymore, boy," one of them said harshly. "We'll claim it for you." Julián felt his blood run cold. "What do you want from me?" "Not from you, from that old traitor." The man spat on the ground. "He stole what was ours decades ago. Now you come, his grandson, to dig it up. How convenient." Julián stepped back, clenching his fists. "This doesn't belong to you. I don't know what history you have with him, but this money is to save my sister." The men let out a cruel laugh. "Save your sister? Boy, the only thing you'll save is your skin if you hand over the box right now." One of them raised his weapon, pointing directly at Julián's chest. The world became an eternal instant. Julián felt the weight of the envelope, of the map, of Eliseo's blood, of his sister's illness. Everything came down to this decision: surrender and lose it all, or fight empty-handed against armed men. He took a deep breath and murmured, as if speaking to Clara, "I won't give up." With a quick movement, he grabbed the old pistol from the box. He didn't know if it worked, but he held it firmly, pointing forward. The men were startled for an instant. "You think you can take us on with that junk?" one of them mocked. Julián pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the canyon like thunder. The bullet struck a rock beside the hooded man, sparking on impact. The pistol trembled in his hands, but one thing was clear: he wasn't willing to give in. The men tensed. The one in front raised his weapon in anger. "Kill him!" Chaos was about to erupt in La Quebrada. The echo of the shot still vibrated against the stone walls when the decision was already carved in Julián's chest. He wasn't going to hand over anything. The smell of gunpowder hit him late, mixed with the iron of the box and the damp earth of the clearing. In front of him, the 3 hooded men shifted like dogs ready to bite. "Last chance, delivery boy," spat the leader, a broad-shouldered man with a gravelly voice. "Drop the gun, step away from the box, and come out with your hands up." Julián didn't blink. He knew that old pistol could fail at any moment. The first shot had been a miracle. The second might never come. His mind, trained by years of routes, impossible schedules, and deadlines, switched lanes. He wouldn't fight at their pace, he'd fight at his. A delivery man knows how to read shortcuts, knows how to turn obstacles into routes. And the canyon was a maze of routes. "Listen to me," he said, angling the pistol just enough to keep them honest. "I don't want trouble. This money is for a transplant. My sister is dying. You can hate Eliseo all you want, but I—" "Shut up." Another interrupted, nervous, fumbling with his weapon. "Drop the box." Julián noticed the tremor in the nervous one's hands. The leader, in contrast, was ice. The third, in back, said nothing. He scanned the edges, watchful like a shepherd dog. One shaky, one cold, one sentinel. Just like when delivering packages, the stern one who signs without looking, the anxious one who asks about every parcel, the guard watching the gate. Each one handled differently. Each one had a door to slip through. "Fine," Julián said, lowering the barrel a centimeter. "Let me pull out the papers. What you want is what incriminates him, right? The rest is useless to you." The cold one smiled humorlessly. "Cooperate and you walk away alive." Julián let out a short laugh, surprising even himself. "That's exactly what they always tell me when I deliver to gated communities." He bent toward the box with slow, deliberate movements. The heavy lid groaned. He reached inside and, instead of the bills, brushed against the documents. Old folders, handwritten codes, newspaper clippings, a laminated ID card with a faded photo. He grabbed a handful and lifted them to show, while at the same time his thumb grazed something at the bottom. 2 road flares, the kind he used when the truck broke down. Eliseo, cautious or superstitious, had saved even those. The sentinel caught sight of the red glow. "Hey, what's that?" "Papers," Julián repeated, and with a flick of the wrist trained by years of tossing hooks and straps, he hurled the bundle of documents high toward the left wall of the canyon. The wind shredded them into sheets that fluttered through the air like flocks of pigeons. The eyes, by pure human instinct, followed them. In that same heartbeat, Julián struck the first flare against the rock. The orange sputter burst with a roar, filling the crevice with sulphurous smoke. He rolled the second one to the nervous man's feet. "Damn it!" the shaky one shouted, stumbling back. "I can't see anything." The burning light painted the clearing in blood. The cold one aimed blindly and fired. The bullet struck stone and sent a spray of dust into Julián's face, but he was no longer where they expected. He rolled to the right, behind a rock shaped like a thorn, clutching the pistol in one hand and the box in the other. He couldn't carry the whole thing. Quickly, he tore off 2 cloth bags of bills and tied them to his belt with the same strap he used for light packages. The box, heavy and open, was left behind as bait. "Track him," the cold one ordered, and the sentinel jumped toward the crevice where the flare's light had erupted, skirting the smoke. Wrong move. Julián had already calculated the echo. With his free hand, he grabbed a fist-sized stone and hurled it against a mound on the opposite side. The sharp thud tricked them into thinking he ran that way. The sentinel turned, his boots slipped on the gravel, and he lost balance for a precious second. Julián sprang from cover, 3 feline steps, and slammed his shoulder into the man's back, pinning him to the wall. The weapon fired skyward, a harmless flash. 1. Julián gasped through clenched teeth, reminding himself he couldn't lose count in the chaos. The cold one was already on him. Julián raised the old pistol and pulled. Click. Silence. The miracle was spent. No time to curse. He lowered the useless gun like a hammer and smashed its handle against the cold one's wrist. The weapon fell. The leader was strong and unfaltering. He drove a punch straight into Julián's stomach, knocking the air out of him. White dots clouded his vision. The shaky one had recovered and was lifting his pistol clumsily. A death instant. The delivery man's instinct did what had so often saved him from dogs, cars, and oven doors flung open in alleys. Not confrontation, redirection. Julián snatched the fallen weapon from the ground, but instead of aiming it, he tossed it to the shaky one as if handing it over. The man, by reflex, opened his hands to catch it, lowered his own, and lost his aim. That blink was enough. Julián kicked the edge of the burning flare toward his feet. The blaze erupted beneath him. A scream. The smell of singed fabric. The cold one, blinded for an instant, groped the ground. Retreat. The shaky one shrieked, now truly believing in death. He's insane. Julián didn't stay to see if they ran. He bolted through the narrow throat he had entered by, his pockets heavy with money and the useless pistol pressed to his thigh. The smoke trailed him like a tail, marking his escape. He stumbled, rose, pressed on. At the mouth of the crevice, the light of dawn struck his face and blinded him for an instant. He blinked hard. There was his path back, the cross-shaped rocks, the dry tree bent by the wind. And beyond, somewhere, his truck slept under the sun. A refuge on wheels. Behind him, he heard voices regrouping and the blast of a weapon aimed blindly at his back. Bullets clashed against rock, spraying stone splinters. The canyon threw back the echoes as if there were 10 pursuers instead of 2. He wasn't going to trust the echo. He sped up. His boots devoured the path. Sweat stung his eyes. His heart pounded. His belt pulled tight with the weight of the bags. A whistle brushed past his ear. Not a bullet. A sharp, human call from the high ledge. Over here. A woman's voice shouted. Julián looked up. A small figure, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and an earth-colored shawl, leaned out between 2 rocks, holding a rope. A ghost? A trick? He didn't have time to wonder. Behind him, the next shot was about to crack. Quick, the woman urged. I saw them come in, and I don't like those hooded men. Julián leapt, grabbed the rope, and let the stranger guide him through a side route, a kind of natural trench that cut the canyon like a vein. They moved crouched, crawling through cold dust, until the world opened into a hidden terrace fit for 2 goats and carrying a secret scent of sage. Keep your head down, she ordered with a gesture. 2 shadows rushed past on the lower level, without seeing them. Thuds, curses, an echo of frustration. Who are you? Julián whispered. My name's Nareda. I harvest oregano and sell cheese, she answered matter-of-factly, as if they were greeting each other in a market. The hooded ones have been circling for 2 days. They're not from around here. Neither are you. But you've got the eyes of someone who doesn't shoot for fun. Julián swallowed hard. I'm a delivery man. I came for what's mine now. I need to save my sister. Nareda studied him, weighing the truth in his voice, and nodded. Then don't lose your pace. There's a goat trail that'll take you out the other side. Your truck's halfway up the slope, right? I saw it arrive. Looks like a tired ox. She smiled faintly, and that brief gesture carried more warmth than the sun. Julián nodded. Nareda pulled a metal canteen from her cloth bag and made him drink a mouthful that tasted of earth and life. Then, without questions, she deftly tied one of the money bags beneath her shawl. What are you doing? Julián asked, alarmed. If they catch you, let them find you with less. They're not after me. See you up top. And she vanished into a crack as if the rock itself had birthed her. Julián followed the path she had pointed out, a passage smelling of ancient dust and wind-struck plants. He moved hunched, his thighs burning, until the passage opened onto a slope he recognized, the path he had taken to get there. Below, like a promise, lay the red belly of the truck. He didn't rush down blindly. He had learned years ago that the last meters are the ones that break your neck. He stopped, listened. 2 gunshots, far off. A curse cut by the wind. No one in sight. He ran the last stretch and reached the truck. The door creaked. As he fit the key, his hands trembled so badly he had to take a deep breath. The engine answered with a grateful roar. The gauges on the dashboard lit up like obedient fireflies. Come on, old boy, he whispered to the wheel. 1 more delivery. He started up, backed out patiently, careful not to sink the tires into the loose gravel. Once on track, he checked the mirror, and saw Nareda appear around the bend, walking quickly, her shawl tight against her body. He raised his hand. She lifted hers and, without ceremony, climbed the side ladder. Julián opened the passenger door for her. I owe you one. You owe me cheese bought, not favors, she said, settling in. And not dying today. They were on the verge of laughing and crying at the same time, but the past came back like an exhale. A pickup appeared on the ridge to the right, windows open, hoods whipping in the wind. Julián's eyes locked on the road out. He drove with a surgeon's precision, nose of the truck dipping into a rut he knew from the way in, letting inertia do its work. He wasn't going to outrun them anymore. He was going to outthink them. Where's the nearest hospital? Nareda asked, looking at the crumpled map Julián handed her. There, in San Geronimo. I left an old man there. It's complicated. Everything is, she said, with a wisdom that didn't sound like a proverb. But you can't go straight. They're waiting. There's an old bridge 2 kilometers ahead. If you cross it, they'll box you in at the gap. Then what? He asked. There's a dry ford upriver. We locals use it when the bridge collapses. The ground is solid. It'll hold your truck if you go in slow. It'll keep you out of the ambush. Julián didn't need more. He turned before the bridge, taking a gravel path that kissed the dry riverbed like a serpent's track. The hooded men's pickup hesitated. They didn't know the route. They stayed above, calculating. A minute of hesitation is worth gold. Julián invested it in life. He crossed the riverbed, feeling the stones pushing like hands from below, and came out the other side with the chassis shaking but intact. The secondary road received them with a sigh. Nareda marked a point on the map with her fingernail. Here's a turnoff that takes you to the main route without passing the bridge. If the pickup boys don't know it, they'll be delayed. Why are you helping me? He asked, eyes still on the road. Because we're all someone's delivery, she replied. You carry your sister in the back seat, even if I can't see her. I carry my grandmother. And, because those men don't want justice. They want blood. And blood doesn't pay the debt of the past. It only multiplies it. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was an agreement. The truck rolled on for several kilometers. The sun was already spitting out burning light. The shadow of the pursuit thinned, but didn't disappear. It was a thread stretching without breaking. In the distance, at last, the clean stretch of the main highway. Julián sighed. The dashboard blinked. Low fuel. He laughed, a hollow laugh. It always happens, Nareda remarked. When you're almost there. Story of my life. He pressed his lips together. San Geronimo was within reach if they didn't run dry. He chose a steady speed, soft on the pedal, no sudden accelerations. The old saving trick he had learned delivering on hills with a stingy tank. And the papers? Nareda asked, pointing to the documents he had salvaged before the trick. Julián handed them over while driving. She opened a folder with steady fingers. Photos from decades ago, men in hats, old trucks, unmarked crates. A list of names and numbers. On the back, a blurred municipal seal. Nareda read aloud a handwritten line. Deal with VG, 1985. Guarantees silence to Reuben. The name fell like a stone in a pond. Julián felt the old shame that wasn't his. Reuben is my father, he said plainly. Nareda didn't ask, and... She only nodded and kept reading. Another sheet, birth certificate, District X. A date, a mother's name Julián didn't know. Another photo, a boy of 4 with a plastic ball. Behind him, a young man with a crooked smile. Reuben. And beside him, Eliseo, with the gaze of someone trying to learn how to hold on. Your father didn't just leave, Nareda whispered. They pulled him out of here with strings. Or he agreed to be tied. My mother always said he chose not to be there, he replied harshly. And that may be true. But this, he tapped the seal with a finger. This also speaks. He wanted to say more, but the dashboard clicked. The fuel needle kissed the red line and dropped past it. The engine coughed. The truck lost a bit of faith. Julián clenched his jaw. 1 more kilometer, he pleaded softly. Just 1. As if the old engine understood prayers, it held its breath. To the right, a small service station appeared, little more than a shack with a couple of pumps and a dog sleeping in the sun. Julián pulled in at an angle. The engine died under the canopy's shadow like a horse coming home. A miracle, murmured Nareda. A worked miracle, he corrected. While a young man in a cap filled the tank, Julián felt again the thread of ice run down his back. 2 state police, in an old patrol car, parked across the lot. They stepped out calmly. One looked around. The other approached with a smile that never reached his eyes. Good morning. Vehicle documents, please. Julián exchanged a glance with Nareda. She, without a word, adjusted her shawl so the hidden bag pressed tighter against her side. Julián pulled out his plastic folder of permits, licenses, papers folded like origami. While one officer inspected them, the other moved behind, snooping, like someone searching without searching. Where are you coming from? Asked the one with the smile. From a delivery out at the ranches, said Julián, like someone talking about the weather. And where are you headed? San Geronimo Hospital. I left a relative there. The officer raised an eyebrow. A relative? He repeated, weighing the word. An old sick man. Julián held his gaze. Heart attack. I can give you the doctor's name if you want. Not necessary, said the other, stepping closer with measured laziness. Only that, he tapped the truck's side panel. There are reports of an incident out in the canyon. Gunfire. An old box. The wrong people digging up old things. Know anything? Nareda fixed her eyes on nothing. Julián swallowed hard. If he said no, they'd smell the lie. If he said yes, they'd smell the blood. And whether they were real police or a facade was the difference between paying a bribe or digging a grave. I know things, he answered, choosing the edge. I know there are hooded men who respect neither roads nor the sick. I know someone called them and told them where to be. And I know my sister can't wait for you to decide which way the coin falls. The smiling officer measured him. The other stared at Nareda for a heartbeat too long, then adjusted his weapon with an almost theatrical gesture. Take care, delivery man, the first said at last, handing back the papers. The road has memory, and sometimes it charges toll with interest. If you see anything strange, report it. I will, said Julián, and he wasn't sure if he was lying. They climbed back into the patrol car, started slow, and left. The young man at the gas station let out a nervous laugh. I thought they were taking you away. Me too, Julián replied, with a smile that for once came out real. Thanks. With the tank full and his heart half full, they continued on their way. San Geronimo greeted them with the same peeling hospital they had seen at dawn. Julián got out in a hurry. Nareda followed 2 steps behind, invisible the way people who've learned not to get in the way know how to be. At reception, a nurse recognized him. The man you brought in at dawn worsened an hour ago. He's asking for you. The world shrank into a single word. Worsened? His heart is tired, said a male voice behind. It was the same doctor, deeper shadows under his eyes. If you want to say goodbye, now is the time. Julián entered the room as if every step of his life had led him to that threshold. Eliseo was paler, his skin thin as paper, his eyes still carrying that stubborn glint of an old man who refuses to kneel. When he saw him, he smiled faintly. I knew you'd come back, he whispered. Julián wanted to say so many things that none found their way out. I went to La Quebrada. You were right. He squeezed his hand gently. I brought enough to start my sister's process. And papers. Many. The papers. Eliseo closed his eyes, searching for strength. In them, there are names connected to your father. Not everything was abandonment, son. Sometimes cowardice dresses as sacrifice, but it still leaves orphans. Julián swallowed the thorn. Where is he? Eliseo tilted his head slightly toward the nightstand. In the drawer, an old phone. Open, an unsent message with a number and a name, Reuben, Workshop. He's still in the state, Eliseo said. He never really left. He just hid in a small life. His voice trembled. Tell him that I'm no longer running, that he can stop hiding. Julián felt the weight of all the roads on his back. He nodded. I'll tell him. And one more thing. Eliseo looked him in the eyes, piercing him with the legacy. Don't bargain with ghosts. If they come for the money, don't buy peace with it. Buy time for life. For your sisters. Peace can't be bought. It's worked for. The old man's breathing grew both shorter and broader. Nareda, at his side, pressed her shawl against her chest, as if holding something fragile. Thank you for stopping last night, Eliseo murmured. If you hadn't, I would have died on the road, never knowing that life still keeps shortcuts. He closed his eyes. It wasn't a dramatic or clean closing. It was the sigh of a man letting go after carrying too many stones. The monitor drew one calmer line, then another more erratic. The doctor approached silently. The nurse went for a sheet. The world became small and sacred. Julián kissed his forehead without a sound. I don't know if I forgive you, he whispered. But thank you. He left the room with steps he didn't know were steady or not. In the hallway, the air smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. Nareda approached, handed back the bag tied under her shawl, and with a quick motion, slipped the bills into Julián's backpack. Now continue your route, she said. Start with the bank, with the papers, with your sister's doctor. Leave the hooded men and the men in uniform for last. The clock doesn't play in favor of health. Julián nodded, pulling the old phone from the drawer. Reuben, workshop, S number glowed on the screen like a beacon he couldn't tell was signaling shore or rocks. I'm going to call him, he said, feeling that this call would be another delivery, the hardest one. But first, he looked at Nareda. Would you come with me? I don't know why, but when you're around, the map makes sense. Nareda thought for a second, looked out the window where the wind moved a tired tree, and smiled faintly. I'll go with you as far as I understand the map, she said. The last steps you walk alone. Julián took a deep breath, gathered the phone, the documents, the money, and the name of the old bridge and the dry ford. Outside, the truck waited for them. He wasn't a hero, he wasn't a saint. He was a delivery man with a task, to carry his sister's life from one point to another without letting it fall along the way. The phone screen, stubborn, lit up again with the name Reuben, workshop, and a silent question. Now? Julián pressed call. A voice on the other end, hoarse from years and silences, said, Mendez workshop, hello. And the past, at last, picked up the receiver. The voice on the other end of the line was a sharp blow to the heart. Mendez workshop, hello. Julián couldn't speak right away. He had a lifetime's knot in his throat. Nareda watched him in silence, like someone respecting a private mourning. Reuben, he finally asked, his voice hoarse. There was a brief silence. A silence heavier than 1,000 words. Who's speaking? The voice answered cautiously. I'm Julián, the son you left behind. The other end of the line went silent. Julián could hear his father's held breath. It was as if time split in two, the years of abandonment and the instant of reunion colliding in that call. Julián, Reuben finally whispered, his voice trembling. You don't know how much I've wanted to hear your voice. Then why did you never come back? Julián shot back, with restrained rage. My mother broke herself working. I grew up with a void no one could fill. And now, after so many years, you expect me to listen as if nothing happened? Reuben sighed on the other end. I didn't come back because I was forced to disappear. I had enemies. The same ones who are chasing you now. If I had stayed, you would have fallen too. I chose to vanish so you could live. It was cowardice, yes, but it was also the only way I knew to protect you. Julián gripped the phone tightly. He didn't know whether to believe him. But the documents he had found in the box, the names, the secret deals, everything pointed to Eliseo having dragged his son into that tangle of debts and vengeance. Your father, Eliseo, died this morning, Julián finally said. He sent you a message. I'm no longer running. You can stop hiding. On the other end, a muffled sob was heard. Stubborn old man, Reuben murmured. There was a long silence. Finally, Reuben spoke with resolve. Listen to me carefully, son. What you have in your hands is dangerous. Not just because of the money. Those documents can sink people who still live off those packs. They will come for you. They will come for everyone you love. Julián looked at the truck through the window, the money hidden under the seat, at Nareda watching him patiently. Then he thought of his sister Clara, of her tired eyes, of the hope of a transplant. Then they'll have to kill me, he said firmly. Because this money will save my sister, even if it costs me my life. On the other end, Reuben was silent for a moment. Then, with a trembling but steady voice, he replied, Let me help you. For the first time in my life, let me be your father. Weeks later, Clara received the transplant. Julián was by her side the whole time, watching every step the way he watched every route in his truck. The money found in La Quebrada paid the hospital bills and opened a new life. Nareda kept accompanying Julián in silence, as an unexpected ally. And although she never confessed what truly moved her, Julián knew that in her he had found a beacon in the middle of storms. The hooded men never completely disappeared. Now and then a shadow still appeared on the road, but Julián was no longer the same. He now drove with the certainty that he wasn't just a delivery man. He was a man who had fought against fate and had one time, the most valuable thing one can deliver in this life. On one of his last deliveries before Christmas, while driving back home, Julián saw a car stopped in the distance on the road. A man was waving his arms, asking for help. For an instant, doubt pierced him like that night. Then, without thinking twice, he stopped the truck. "Because everyone deserves someone to stop for them," he whispered. And he went on, fulfilling the most important delivery of all, that of hope.